lesson 4 activity, where we need to evaluate or look into a above 1 megawatt application and the grid impact study that has done for that. And I think this is just giving you a sense of the type of documents that's going to land on your table for processing systems above 1 megawatt. Okay, so we try to anonymize it as far as possible. So this just so that you could see more or less what we have here in hand. So that will obviously be the details from the owner, the details from the site itself, and then you could see here that the specific customer has been given the approval to connect. Here we can see energy from the embedded generator to be used solely within the consumer's electrical network. And I want to say most of the self-consumption generators would go for that option. They are seldomly sized with intention to export. And if they do export, what they export would be quite limited. But anyway, that's for this case the case. We see the lifetime expectancy is 25 years. We also see that this is when they intend to start and complete the project time, so 2021. So this site should be up and running. You see now it's asking about the electrical parameters and the generator transformer parameters, but because this is a solar PV site, they do not have all of these factors, either because it's not connected to the MV network or the HV network, or that they're using inverter-based generation. So that's why they've indicated all of these are not applicable and not being used. So here we go in terms of the embedded generator that's connecting on the LV side, not the MV side. So there's already an existing one. So you'll see that's already one that's connected. It's a 990 kilowatt, and the type is solar. And that's actually also quite interesting. A lot of existing sites or even new sites, they tend to aim for systems just below 1 megawatt. It eases the process because we know as soon as it goes beyond 1 megawatt, there's additional requirements that need to kick in. And we also know that in the past, and that's where Marius's question then came in, is that licensing was typically required for systems of 1 megawatt or above. And that has now been removed, hence why we see a lot of legacy sites just below 1 megawatt. So they say here it's a new installation that they want to add to that. So the size of the proposed generation is almost 3 megawatt, right? Power factor of the operation is 1. And yes, most of these LV connected systems, you can change the power factor rating. It's got a leading of lagging of 0.95, 0.98. But the default setting would be a power factor of 1, which means it's a pure active power generator. Number of inverters is 28. We also see that it's 3-phase inverters. There's the number of panels and the power rating. If we want to do I always just like to do like a sanity check calculation with these. So it's 868, 48 times 0.455 to convert it into kilowatt. So it should give you in total 3,934 kilowatt. So that's the DC label. Just want to see if they've indicated here. Here they say the kilowatt hours, that's the kilowatt hour consumption generation. Just want to see if they've given the capacity. No, they've not. So who can tell me why is there a difference between that value there, the 3080, and what I've calculated just now? Who can tell me why there's a difference? Or what's the difference?
The installed DC capacity is usually upsized from your inverter active output to account for conditions above STC. Yes.
Great, thank you, Wilbur. You've given me actually a few more pointers there. But yes, the first thing is to be able to understand this. What we see here on the calculation is the capacity of the PV or the DC nameplate rating, right? And that nameplate rating is at standard test conditions or STC, as Wilbur has mentioned. The 3080 has to do with the inverter size or the AC size. And yes, you will see most solar installations, they actually oversize the PV compared to the inverter, and that's to compensate for performance losses, because the reality is that this PV system will seldomly produce this actual capacity. What we've seen is that it most probably will produce at peak in the middle of the day around 80% of that. So if we times that with 0.8, you'll see it's about 3,147. But even with this output, the inverter will not allow more than 3080 output. So maybe a follow-up question would be here, if we're going to evaluate this application just on the just on this specific size here, if we ignore the existing installation, just taking the new installation into account, will we evaluate it based on the DC capacity or based on the inverter AC capacity? Who can tell or confirm that for us?
I think you will be looking only at the active power component, because that is what your network will see, right?
Yes, that's correct, Wilbur. So we can even increase this PV size to more than this, but at the end of the day, what's been injected or generated will be limited by the inverter. So the DC will not define that. Okay, there's just some interesting background facts, so that's why we look at that. If we look further, we'll see that there's no battery, so it's not a hybrid system, it's a pure grid-tied system. There's no ampere hours because there's no batteries involved. And there we can see the expected indicate total kilowatt hours to be generated. A little bit difficult to see how that has been cut off, and then indicate the kilowatt hours to be exported to the grid. You'll see it's a small portion expecting going back to the grid. Again, we could do some basic calculations to see more or less if the values are correct, but that will totally depend on site, especially if they're not going to feed back. And then they say the percentage in kilowatt hours export to the grid in the following times. Peak periods, they say almost 0% will be exported in peak, 40% will be exported in standard, and then 0 in off-peak, which is quite interesting. Because on weekends, obviously it depends on what type of load we have here, but I would expect in all weekends they might export in off-peak periods. But bottom line is they expect that bulk of whatever they export would be in the standard periods. Okay, if we read further, please stop me if there's something that's not clear or you want to contribute. I know we do have some of the staff here that's familiar with this application, so feel free to add or give your own interpretation. Method of synchronization is automatic. It's an inverter generator, and we've got the NRS 2-1 compliant and certified. Method of generator control is active anti-islanding, voltage frequency, grid impedance monitoring. Let's just zoom in a bit. An island detection and clearance within 2 seconds by inverter. If we continue here, point of common coupling and method of isolation, under or over voltage protection, over and under frequency protection, grid impedance monitoring. The system will be coupled to the facility's existing LV network via multiple 1,500 amp MCCB tie-in breakers. And then method of isolation, the end of fire. The system can isolate at the PVDB main breakers or at the point of common coupling in the sub-main LV boards. So from what I can pick up here is that they can only isolate the switch off on the AC side, not on the DC side. So that might be a limitation. And then they will provide the information of how it's going to be installed and where it is. Okay, single line diagram still needs to be provided. I don't know if we want to, if that's required now for this activity. But yeah, and then compliance, they say that they will comply with the renewable energy grid code. They will comply with the 097 series, the 048 series, which has to do with the power quality. And then and it will adhere to the annexure of this application. So they're yes, and they've got certificates attached to say that it does adhere to that. And here's the annexure. Gerhard, shall we go through the annexure just to see what are the documents that they need to provide or the responsibilities that's been highlighted?
I think you can do that.
Let's do that then. So the documents and responsibilities are actually defined here. So they say responsibilities of the embedded generator to the municipality is that we say shall enter into connection agreement with the utility before connecting to the distribution system. The embedded generator shall ensure that the reliability of the quality supply complies with terms of the connection agreement. They shall also comply with the protection requirements, as well as protection of their own plant against abnormalities, which could arise coming from the distribution system. The generator shall also be responsible for the dedicated connection cost incurred on the transmission system or distribution system as a result of connecting this generating facility. And they shall also be responsible for the synchronization of the generating facility to the distribution system within the pre-agreed settings. So I think what is important to realize here is that whoever needs to connect their network, the generator, needs to adhere to these requirements, and that's typically captured within the connection agreement. Okay, connection point technical requirements includes that it should be responsible for the design, construction, maintenance, and operation of the equipment of the generation side of the connection point. They're responsible for the provision of the site required for the installation of the distribution equipment required for connecting to the generating facility. The technical specification of the connection shall be agreed upon by the parties based on the distribution system impact assessment studies. So from the studies, if they do pick up that they need to make some amendments, that they do provide for that. Circuit breaker and visible isolation shall be installed at the connection point to provide the means of electrical isolating the distribution system from the generating facilities. So how I've seen this being done by Eskom is that they install another 4-pole breaker, which they can isolate both the lives and the neutral. This is possible and makes sense for systems that's grid tied. There are, however, challenges with hybrid systems when you start isolating that neutral and losing that earth neutral connection. That's a discussion for another day. The embedded generator shall be responsible for the circuit breaker to connect or disconnect the generator of the plant, and the location of the circuit breaker must be visible to isolate the side on both parties. If we look at the protection requirements, so the protection shall comply with the requirements of the utility. Additional features including intertripping or generator plant status to be agreed upon by the parties. Protection schemes used by the generator shall be incorporate adequate facilities on testing and maintenance, so not just having it installed, but checking it on a regular basis. And the protection scheme shall be submitted by the generator for the approval by the utility. Okay, so then other protection requirements, we've got the phase and earth fault protection, over and under voltage and over and under frequency protection, fault on the distribution systems. So in that regard, they need to have protection to make sure that even if there are faults and the disturbances coming from the utility, that it must be able to protect itself from that. There's islanding, and then quality of supply requirements. So Gerhard is going to touch on these now, some of them. Frequency variations, power factor, and fault levels. Telemetry, so the generator shall have the means to remotely report on the status change of any critical function that may negatively impact the quality of supply from the distributor. And then operational responsibilities, the generator shall ensure that the generator units operate within the capabilities defined in the connection agreement entered into with the distributor. They need to be able to cooperate with the distributor to executing the operational activities during emergency generation conditions. So just to maybe highlight this, I think to date, this wasn't really utilized or required because most of these plants would just generate. But we're moving now into an era where I can see they start developing some form of, they call it procedures or method statements in terms of how to control these plants if we start to see some instability on the network. And as more and more of these systems are being connected, this functionality is quite crucial. So be on the lookout and be aware of that. Sorry, this one here. So then correcting quality of supply problems caused by the equipment connected to the distributor. All customers must declare cogeneration plants, licensed or not, to specify interlocking mechanism to prevent in-event parallel operation with the distribution network. So if I understand this correctly, this is referring to almost like hybrid systems, but that's where you combine the solar inverter generation with a diesel generation. Whenever I see cogeneration, I immediately think of thermal and electrical. It's those two, but this has to do with if you have a plant that's going to run with the backup generators so that it's declared, just to make sure that there's no way for this hybrid system with the solar and generator or solar and something else not to feed back when it's disconnecting from the utility. The embedded generator shall have the required protection to trip the event of momentary supply of loss causing island conditions or prevent paralleling of out of synchronism due to auto-reco's functionalities. So just making sure with that code generation that it's not going to influence the grid. Fault reporting analysis and investigation. So you'll see here it's asking for 15-minute interval event reporting or adjusting. Outage scheduling and coordination. So if they need to switch off. So it says here, maximum capacity greater than 1 megawatt shall furnish the distributor with information on planned outages so that they can properly plan and coordinate accordingly. And there we've got the NRS, grid interconnection, embedded generation requirements, quality of supply 048. And then additional requirements is that if there's 11 kV side generated transformer, the NER must be fitted, and then where it's delta, the NECR must be fitted as well. I know that this is quite a technical and challenging thing to achieve. So you don't need to remember all of these points. I think it's just so that you can have an idea of an application form and the information that's been asked for. You'll notice there's a lot of aspects that we haven't discussed or looked into for SCCG. Although they do utilize this for their SCCG applications, not just above 1 megawatt. So I think it's quite comprehensive, and we can give kudos, mention kudos to the utility for putting something like this together, and thank you for sharing this as an example. Are there any questions from this, or Gerard, maybe some comments or something that I've skipped over you want maybe to review quickly?
I think we'll discuss the aspects as we go through the evaluation. There are a few points that I have marked up that I will specifically mention when we look at the evaluation.
Perfect.
So there was a question in the chat box, which is very technical. I think we should probably leave that one to after the both activities. I don't know what you're feeling.
Yeah, I agree. Let's focus on the training. It's a good one, Roy. So let's maybe just have that discussion afterwards. Agreed. Okay, you're going to continue, right?
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to share screen. So basically what we are doing now is the first 3 steps. That was part of lesson 4. And okay, let me go to the check sheet. So step 1, basically that's what Fora has addressed now. Fora, can you maybe share that Google Drive so long? Because I think it's important. Let's get everybody on board. So there's a Google Drive link. I'll speak while Fora shares it.
If you say Drive, you're referring to the Google form, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'll share that.
So as we discuss this example now, I'm going to ask you to, in essence, mark on the Google form what you think is the correct answer. So I'll give you a little bit of time as we discuss it. And afterwards, we can do it after step 1. We can make, you can see the responses then, Nafora?
Yes.
Also going to share my screen with that.
The sequence might be a little bit different, but the checks are there. So just have a look. The sequence within a step, that's what I mean. Just
Yes.
Keep that in mind. No, I might just need to zoom in. There we go.
All right. So we've got, and it's slightly different because we actually have a no option in the Google form as well. Of course, when you do the checklist for your sign off at the end of such a project, if it's a no, I would leave it open and just go back to whether it's a department within the distributor or whether it is the customer, and tell them you still need to do this. And you will only tick it off once it is done. If it's not applicable, of course, then you can mark that it's not applicable. And then there's nothing for the customer or the distributor to still do this. And you can add some comments or notes. And I think it's very useful, especially if you mark something as not applicable, that you say why it is not applicable. If you feel that you cannot mark yes, you can also note down why you think it's still outstanding, and then continue from there. But the idea is that what we've showed on the very first slide is not necessarily so clear. So let me share the guide as well. And that starts on page 57, where we have the entire checklist, and this will still be updated because, for instance, here we've got everything lumped together, and I think it'll be worthwhile to just separate them. But you can see there's, for all the steps that we are still going to go through this week, there is a checklist so that you can, at the end, once everything is signed off, you can say, okay, this plant is compliant and can now operate commercially. Okay. So does everybody have the Google form open already?
See the thumbs up are coming through. Yeah, seems like we're good to go, Gerard.
So I will remain on this Google form. And the first step is, in fact, fairly simple. So the question is, has this customer been provided with a full information pack? And the application fee invoice, okay, obviously the application form and the application fee invoice. Now, if you look at how complete that form is, we didn't share everything else that has been shared with the customer. So think back in terms of your own scenario and the resources that is available already on the SSEG website. Would you, in essence, be able to give the customer that full information pack? So this customer obviously did receive the application form, which he has completed and submitted. So you can just mark what you think here, and then at the end we can discuss it. And the second question is, was the application received?
So
Sorry,
Gerard,
yes, Laura?
just want to confirm, so each person needs to respond to this from their own municipality
Yes.
perspective? Okay, so in other words, if they don't have anything yet and they can't give them, or should they go according to, like you said, what's available on the website?
I think
just want to, yeah.
keep in mind what's available on the website. Shall we share that as well? Can do it here. So if you go to the sseg.org.za website, you will see there's the resource pack, and there's specifically for 1 megawatt and larger. So there's the guide document that we are referring to all the time. There's a connection and use of system agreement example. there is the application form. And this one does contain a few more questions than in the SSEG application form. There's a grid code compliance test guideline that was issued by NERSA. Cape Town has the technical standard for interconnection, so that gives a lot of the technical requirements. Yeah, so all of these are basically some additional information. I can't remember what's under the support documents. I think these are more for SSEG. So for 1 megawatt and larger, there are a few example agreements. There's definitely the application form. And if you give the customer this guide document, there is definitely a lot of additional information. Let me just mute this chat if I can.
Gerard, while you're doing that, could you maybe just highlight, is there a specific document in the info pack that's not there? Or something that you say is missing from an info pack perspective?
Well, yes, there would probably be a few. The tariffs, examples of the other agreements, self-build agreement, wheeling agreement.
What about the network information? Would they need that as well?
The network information is per application. It's very specific because it's that area of the network.
Yes.
So that you would give probably when the customer, well, you will only give that if the customer is going to do the grid impact study.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's not necessary.
Noted, thank you.
Okay, so I think most of what we said is required is already, at least the bare minimum is provided, and there's definitely technical guidance for the generator on what the overall process is. Okay. I don't know how to mute another chat. Do you? For
you want to mute the chat in the MS Teams?
yeah, it's a different chat.
Yeah, no, we don't hear anything.
Oh, okay, good. And so the first question was basically that information pack, was that available? The next one is, has the application been received and is it complete? So let me share the application form again. So, okay, of course, this has been blanked out, so that's not an issue. Maybe if this customer is connecting to 11 kV, that I don't actually see that on this application form. But it is 11 kV. So in terms of one of the requirements, it specifically says that the NEC, NER, NECR is required. So this might be one of those things that one can pick up, that it said that it's not applicable, but maybe it is applicable. So one would go back to the customer and say, okay, there's definitely a problem here. Yeah, for the rest, I don't think I missed anything. The single line diagram I did show yesterday. I can quickly go to it. So there's a more detailed single line diagram. This is actually part of the grid impact study report. So, but the bottom line is it's available. So in your opinion, was this application form complete? And then the last question would be, okay, has the application fee been paid? Okay, has everybody answered these 3 questions? Okay, let me ask, who is still busy?
Okay, so
For-
just to recap in terms of what you need to do, we provided you the information of an application. You're now looking at the information that we provided you, and you're going to tick those boxes based on your own interpretation and your municipal perspective. That's what you need to do. So there's no wrong or right. It's just you need to apply your mind and then say, yes, it's been provided, it's fine, or no, it's not, or it's not applicable. So I know some Unix don't have any application fee, so you just say it's not applicable. So you just respond based on your own application.
Okay, Foro, would you be able to share the results? Because I still can't get to the edit option or see the results.
Yes, I can do that. Let me just quickly see. You only want to see step 1 and the first.
Yes, please, just the step
Okay.
1.
Okay, I think you have to resubmit everything before you can see it.
Oh,
So yeah, so you won't
okay.
be able. So I
All
think you
right.
need to proceed first before we can have a look. Because
Yes.
only 2 people were able to do that, but that's not the total response.
Apologies for that. So let's continue then to the next one. This is now the evaluation. Let's look at the evaluation flowchart. All right. So firstly, we said if you've done like a hosting capacity study, then you might have some simplified connection criteria against which you can evaluate this application. I'm going to assume that it's not in place because I don't think many of our distributors would have done it. So obviously this is not applicable, so it definitely doesn't pass the simplified connection criteria. So let's go to the grid impact study. And the other document that we shared with you on the platform is just the executive summary. So my overall opinion, if you look at the entire report, is that it's more of a mixture of the grid impact study and the grid code compliance study. So there's a lot of the grid code compliance aspects that were addressed. And the important details is actually in the executive summary that would relate to the grid impact study. Now, we are not dealing with how to do the impact study, and we don't really look at how to evaluate it, but this is just to give you an indication of some of the things that one would look at. We have specified in the presentations, for instance, what are your steady state requirements, the voltage change, so the thermal loading, voltage levels, voltage change requirements, and those are proposed. It's based on what's being done internationally, at least for the network normal conditions, as well as what Eskom has implemented based on those kind of international interactions. So from there, that is what you would look at. Additional steps would be to get the protection, the maintenance. So we've got maintenance, power quality, protection, specifically highlighted here. And if you look at the check sheet for step 2, you would also see there might be other considerations which we didn't discuss in the presentation, but you can go and look at it in the document. What's the impact of load shedding? Can you exclude this generator from load shedding to actually support the network? Your grid availability, ramp rates, what's the impact when this generator switches or ramps up quickly or slowly? Can this generator actually supply some of the ancillary services where it supports the grid with like a reserve margin? Battery charging, just like with the 09723, you don't want them to charge from the grid at too high a rate, because that of course affects your network capacity. But can they also support? So if they have battery systems installed, can they actually support the network during peak load conditions? Network operations, have you looked at the impact on your network operations? So for instance, if there are contingencies, can you curtail the generator? These kind of things. That's all that one would have to look at. So it's different departments that needs to consider the potential impact of these larger generators. And then at the end, your cost estimate letter, which is the next activity, not this one right now. So let's look at the executive summary. So firstly, it says that the customer will be installing an additional 3,300 kVA in addition to the existing 990 kVA. This is one of the first things that I've picked up. This is not what's in the application form. Application form said 3,080. So of course, this might make you want to go back and say, but the application form isn't correct. They have to resubmit the application form to fix this. So in terms of the potential impact, they just state the requirements. They don't see any impacts on the voltage regulation. Just see where that is. They really talk only about the voltage changes, which can be relatively high. So 3.59% when the mall is operating and the PV plant is tripped, which is less than when just the customer is tripped. So now, yes, it seems to improve it, but is this within the acceptable limits? One thing that one could consider is looking at this if the power factor is not unity, but actually the PV generator is absorbing reactive power. So this does exceed what one would typically say is a recommended guideline. But because it does reduce it, one could say it is regarded as acceptable. And they don't speak anything about, there's no overloading on the network. Voltages remain within specification. So it is not highlighted as a problem. There is a concern in terms of the power factor range, but this is a grid code compliance requirement, which we will get to later. So let's not confuse the grid impact with the grid code compliance. All right. Okay, another aspect that I picked up that was interesting in the summary, they do say there's a high probability of export into the grid. There's maximum exported power to the municipality. And there's a very high probability of the site causing reverse power feed. And in the application form, they very clearly said to be used solely within the consumer's electricity network. And my understanding is that this means that there won't be any export at any time. So it's just another thing that I've picked up in terms of the application form. So let's go back to the checklist. So you are now busy to evaluate the application, and this still only has the grid or network impact study, protection, evaluation and coordination, and the maintenance listed right here. So once again, think of it in terms of your own scenario, given the information that you've seen. The grid network impact study has been done. And the question is, would you accept this? Protection, coordination, and evaluation. Well, the fault levels are mentioned. So there is the addition towards the fault level. Is that NEMA? Can everybody hear me again?
We heard you all the way.
Oh, because my computer says I'm not connected to the internet. Okay, so the three-phase fault level before the PV plant is connected, 11.337 kiloamps, three-phase. So if you add 173 amperes to that, it becomes about 11.5 kiloamps. So that would be, at least from equipment ratings perspective, that's not a significant change, and all equipment would probably still be within spec. So the coordination is the next step, where protection will need to make sure that you still have adequate coordination between the different protection aspects. All right, so in your opinion, just go and mark these 4. And I think right now we can't continue actually, so just mark the rest as not applicable. So up to here, and then we can discuss it. Unless for you can cut off the Google form here while everybody is online.
That is possible. Just need
But
to
don't
see.
throw it away, please.
Okay. Just hold on one moment. Okay, so is it just which one do you want to remove? Both steps 3. Are you currently muted?
Yeah, okay, I think from step 3, yes, just delete that.
Okay. Otherwise, like you said, let them just select non-applicable right through, then submit. That's also okay. I'm just thinking that might.
That's probably better, yes.
Yes. Okay, so you need to submit your opinion up to step 2, and then step 3, you're just going to select not applicable for now. We will just duplicate that for the next sessions.
So the
Okay.
cost estimate letter we will do in the next activity. So of course that's not estimated yet, issued yet. So I think we'll give you like 2 minutes, and then before can you share the responses?
Sure, I can. I can also show whose responses we've got. We've got 8 responses, 9 responses so far. So if you can see your name, we have your response. Thank you. Let's give a few more minutes for the rest to supply. Like I said, please give your opinion based on the information provided, based on your municipality. For questions up to step 2, and then step 3, just select not applicable right through. Just select not applicable for step 3. There's 2 sections for step 3, and then we'll look at the responses. Please let us know if there's anyone that does not have access or struggle to open up the Google Docs, please.
I just saw the time.
Yes. I'm also a bit concerned in terms of timeline. You still need to do the cost estimate data, and what else is the quiz they don't need to do now. They can do that afterwards. So yeah, time-wise, your side?
Yeah, I think it's just briefly going through the cost estimate letter.
Okay.
And doing that example.
You know what? I'm going to stop. Oh no, we're still busy with this activity, so we need to keep the recording. But we should just do a new recording for the cost estimate letter. But we need to edit this one, unfortunately. Okay, so yeah, we've got 17 responses, so that's almost halfway. I think let's work with that. If you let the rest respond.
Okay, so I think most of you see that there are resources available, even if you might not even have it all in hand at the moment, but you're getting on track to have that full information pack. Then, of course, the application form has been received, and subsequently, we've mentioned that there are some queries about what's in the application form, but that you can go back and fix. Obviously, right at the end, these two should align. And then the application fee paid, you see a few people, it's at 6 or 7, said that it's not applicable. And of course, we didn't provide it, and we don't know if there was an application fee that was paid that we didn't actually request from the distributor as part of the example. So we can assume if it was there, it has been paid.
Yeah, or it could be that as a municipality, you don't have an application fee yet.
Yes.
Okay. So there's some comments. I don't know if you want to see.
So you're not applicable. Munich doesn't have application fees. No attachment and mostly incorrectly filled in. No approved application fee. Okay, so there is a comment on the NECR or NEC that was marked but not applicable. Metering issues. So I assume that they do expect metering issues. I don't know if anybody who said that, if they want to maybe open their mic and just talk about it. Okay, so obviously the metering has to be updated. That's part of the step 2, where you do all of these checks. Okay, any questions about step 1? That's just the application information pack, the application form, and the application fee. So going, gone. It's not a gone forever. You can still type your questions, but let's continue. So next, to evaluate the application, well, there is a grid impact study. So some evaluation has been done. The question is now whether you accept it. And so 5 people said that the grid impact study has not been provided. So it's just the executive summary that we've shared with you. And like I said, the actual report is more of a mix between the grid impact study and the grid code compliance aspects, which is why we've kept it separate for now. So any comments on that, why you said that it wasn't provided? Okay, let's continue. Protection, evaluation, and coordination. Yes, once again, that isn't explicitly provided. It's just a fault level that's provided. Yes, not even in the report is there details about that. However, there is information in the technical requirements in the application form that says that this should be done. So hopefully by the end of the project, that has been sorted out between the customer and the protection department of the distributor. And maintenance, yes, that there's no indication of maintenance, and that is a purely internal evaluation. What is the impact on your maintenance staff and capacity or resources to actually do, if they're going to install the generator, how is it going to affect that?
Just to understand, so this maintenance is not talking to the maintenance of the generator, this is talking to the maintenance of the network, or the
Yes,
protection, because I understand that protection, for example, needs to be tested and calibrated on a regular base. Or I don't know, yearly interval or something, 5-yearly interval. So this is talking
yes,
to the
it's
utility maintenance.
utility maintenance, because especially if there's additional assets that's required to connect the generator. So you need to add more transformers, you need to add more lines. What is the impact on your maintenance and operational budgets and manpower?
Okay, thank you.
Then I suppose some people said that yes, because they know that it would have been done for the cost estimate letter, but that's the next. Is there a question you can ask?
80108
Sorry, Gerard, I just muted everyone because I can't find the person. Just unmute yourself again.
Okay, thanks for. Okay, then we did discuss the other considerations as well, and what needs to be included. Network operations, we spoke about now. That's once again an internal affair that you need to discuss with your network operations department. The quality of supply, we have not, seems like it's slightly different to the one that I had. We haven't really discussed this. But when we get to the grid code compliance, we will talk about all the quality of supply requirements for the distributor. Okay. Okay, and that's how far we went for now. So the rest should all be not applicable. Okay, so any comments or questions up to here?
If I could maybe just make a comment in terms of the checklist, because in a way it might be quite confusing because you're not 100% sure how to implement or interpret the checklist. The checklist is purely there to make you aware of the different aspects that need to be considered or looked into or approved, or an activity that needs to be done, so that at the end of the day you would be able to approve the system. So the exact outputs of that might be that the customer needs to do something and provide a document or report in that regard. It might be that on your side you need to have an internal meeting with relevant people or get approval or inputs or whatever the case might be. It's just so that you at the end of the day did consider those aspects, and not afterwards like, oh no, we didn't consider putting in the protection or the power quality staff from our team, and they were not considered in terms of this project, so that we couldn't get. So it might be that now it's just a checklist to say tick off, but that checklist might entail a lot of steps or a lot of activities that needs to be done before you can tick it off. So just be aware of that. Obviously, the guideline talks to those steps or activities, but it might be other or additional steps that's not listed or discussed that might be totally internal. So that's so in the context of the information we provide, we say yes or no. It's we've looked at it, but it might be that you need to do more before you can say, okay, yes, now we're comfortable with that. Gerard, am I right by saying it that way?
Yes, I think, like you said, the purpose of the checklist is that you can, as you progress, make sure that the project is on track.
Thank you. Okay, so then you will go over to the cost estimate, right? Before we go
Yes.
there, any other questions or comments?